Over its near 200-year history, London Zoo has become a bastion of conservation. Since opening in 1828, the zoo now houses 15,000 individual animals, with many more that are sadly no longer with us. And to house such amazing wildlife, the zoo has constructed several eye-catching exhibits over the years. Each of these shows us not only how our understanding of animal behavior has changed, but also how increased efforts in conservation have changed how we house animals. So today I will take you on a chronological tour of London Zoo's amazing architecture. We start our journey with the oldest surviving exhibit at the zoo, the Raven Cage. Thought to have been built in 1829 by the zoo's first architect, Decimus Burton, it was originally built to house the zoo macaws, but over the years, it has housed a number of bird species such as owls, vultures, and the enclosure's namesake, ravens. Since its construction, the cage has been moved and renovated several times, including one notable time in 1948 when the cage was rebuilt after it was damaged during the German bombings of London during the Second World War. Despite this, the cage still retains its general size and shape as it had when it was built, and in 1971 was moved to its current location next to the zoo's clock tower. Despite now being deemed unsuitable for birds, the cage remains to remind guests how far the zoo has come since those early days. Up next, we have the oldest building in the zoo that is still used for its intended purpose, the Giraffe House. Constructed in 1837, it was built yet again by Decimus Burton to house the 4 new giraffes the zoo had received the previous year. Unlike his earlier works, the Giraffe House was a lot simpler, and it was clear the building was designed to house giraffes, with it standing over 21 feet tall at the eaves. It also utilised an early central heating system to keep the temperature more comfortable for the giraffes, but this wouldn't be the only thing added to the building. 12 years later, the house gained both a west and east wing, with the former housing eland, antelope and zebra, and the latter becoming home to one of the zoo's most famous attractions, Obashi the hippopotamus, the first hippo England had seen since Roman times. This exhibit proved to be very good for the giraffes. Between 1839 and 1867, 17 calves were born at the house, with one even being seen by Queen Victoria during a visit to the zoo. However, this building hasn't been problem-free over its nearly 185-year history. During the Blitz of 1940, German bombs damaged the house, allowing a zebra to escape from the zoo. However, it was captured in Camden Market before it got the chance to go all Madagascar. This damage was repaired, and in the 1960s, the house was renovated with several new paddocks now placed around the original house. Despite its age and rebuilds, the Giraffe House still has several features that were seen in the original, such as its distinctive rounded entrance doors. Today, the Giraffe House stands as the oldest zoo building in the world that still houses its intended residents. Moving along 50 years now, we reach 1882 and the construction of the Blackburn Pavilion. Built by Charles Brown Trollope, it was originally constructed to replace the zoo's first Reptile House, which was built in 1849. The look of this building was inspired by garden pavilions of the time, and inside it housed 3 ponds, with the largest being used to house crocodiles. In 1926, the reptiles were moved to a new building that we'll talk about later, and in 1928, the Blackburn Pavilion was changed to house birds instead. This change in inhabitants eventually led to the whole building being restored in 2008 to provide the birds with better conditions. During this restoration, the building got its name, the Blackburn Pavilion, in honour of the Blackburn family, who were longtime supporters of the zoo. Nowadays, the pavilion is still open and is home to over 50 different bird species. Moving into the 20th century, we now come to the construction of the Mappin Terraces. Built in 1914, this was by far the zoo's most ambitious exhibit, being envisioned as a three-tiered exhibit with flamingos along the bottom layer, 4 exhibits in the middle that have housed several species over the years, including polar bears, and a top layer that was used to house mountain goats. This latter species explains the inclusion of the somewhat blocky mountain tops. Even though by today's standards they may be considered unsuitable, this at the time was a genuine effort to give animals a much more realistic and natural environment. Despite this effort, the exhibits were later deemed unsuitable for housing animals, and in 2008 the whole area was renovated and rebuilt into the zoo's Outback exhibit. Does anyone else find it funny that the exhibit that once housed polar bears is now housing outback animals such as wallabies? Sadly though, this exhibit doesn't include the top 2 layers of the pavilion, and today the mountains stand tall over London Zoo as a sign of a turning point in animal and zoo management. Nearly 10 years later, we see the construction of the building known simply as the Aquarium. Built to replace the zoo's original aquatic vivarium, plans for the building were included in the designs for the aforementioned Mappin Terraces. However, the building wasn't constructed until 1923 due to budget restrictions during the First World War. Eventually, the building was opened in 1924 by King George V. It continued the zoo's tradition of being innovative, as it became the first facility to provide the correct living conditions for saltwater species. Sadly, the aquarium is no longer in use. It was closed in 2019 after nearly 100 years of constant use, and has now been used as the canvas for a mural that depicts several of the species housed at the zoo. Just 3 years later, London Zoo saw the construction of possibly its most famous building, the Reptile House. Why is this building the zoo's most famous? Well, that's because it got a starring role in the 2001 film Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, where it served as the setting for the scene where Harry speaks to a Burmese python. But the building history goes further back than 2001. The Reptile House was the third one the zoo had constructed, and was designed by the truly remarkable Joan Proctor. A passionate herpetologist from a young age, she was the former keeper of reptiles and fish at the Natural History Museum before joining London Zoo as the curator of reptiles and amphibians in 1923, becoming the first woman to do so. In 1926, she and architect Edward Guy Dauber constructed the Reptile House, which at the time was seen as one of the most sophisticated and forward-thinking zoo buildings in the world. Using her knowledge, Proctor gave the Reptile House several features that would ensure the best for the animals, such as Vitaglass, which would provide the reptiles with natural ultraviolet light and heating for the reptiles to bask. This building remained open for many years, but closed in 2023 to make way for the new and improved The Secret Life of Reptiles and Amphibians, which opened in 2024. As we move along, we will see that the buildings are becoming more ambitious and are trying to become more suitable for animal habitation. These are phrases that would have been used to describe our next building back in its day, the Roundhouse. Constructed by the Tecton Group, who would go on to design another enclosure you'll see later, the enclosure was built to house the zoo's male and female gorillas. The brief for this project was as follows: provide the gorillas with access to an open-air enclosure in summer and a climate-controlled indoor enclosure in winter, while allowing visitors to view the animals all year round. To achieve this, the Roundhouse was constructed in 2 halves, with one half being open air and the other inside. In the winter, the outside half would be concealed by a revolving door covering the outside, allowing the inside of the enclosure to be temperature controlled for the gorillas. Inside viewing areas were constructed to allow viewing of the animals during this period. Once summer came around, the revolving door would be pulled back, allowing the gorillas to be viewed by guests in their outside half. Even though it was designed with them in mind, it was later deemed that the Roundhouse was unsuitable for gorillas. Since then, the exhibit exhibit has hosted a number of animals, such as orangutans, chimps, koalas, aye-ayes, and fruit bats. Today, it is no longer considered suitable for any animal to be kept within it. The building remains preserved due to its historical significance as one of the first modernist buildings in England, alongside another famous enclosure at the zoo. 1 year later, Tecton were commissioned to build yet another enclosure for the zoo, this time in the form of a penguin enclosure. This second build, however, would prove to be much more visually striking and technologically challenging than their first. Based on the shape of an egg, the structure employed open viewing windows instead of cages, nest boxes for the birds, and, most notably, a pair of interlaced spiral ramps made from concrete in its center. The modernist look made it very popular with a number of guests over its years of use, with its most notable being Princess Elizabeth and Margaret in 1939. However, as our understanding of penguin care grew, it was clear that the exhibit wasn't the best for our feathery friends. The concrete that the ramps and floor were made out of wasn't the best for the birds' feet, and it was later closed in 2004, with the penguins being moved to a new habitat. However, the pool still has its uses today as a water feature and, more notably, as a prominent filming location, appearing in the music video for the song As It Was by Harry Styles. Moving well along to 1965, we see the opening of the final structure of today's video, the Snowdon Aviary, now known today as Monkey Valley. Originally the brainchild of one Sir Hugh Casson, the idea for the aviary was to transform the zoological gardens to make them an outstanding feature of London's architecture and landscape, and at the same time provide our collection of wild animals the most varied and one of the largest in the world, with housing best suited to its diverse physical and psychological needs. To help build this, the zoo hired Anthony Armstrong Jones, otherwise known as the first Earl of Snowdon. It has been speculated that he was suggested for the job by his then brother-in-law and president of the ZSL at the time, Prince Philip. His title is what eventually gave the structure its name, as initially it was going to be dubbed the Northern Aviary, but was called the Snowdon Aviary after the name was used during the construction, and it stuck. Standing close to 80 feet in some places, the structure was designed to give birds and people enough space to coexist. The aviary has played host to over 150 species of birds since its construction, and has given guests the chance to get up close to them in the form of a zigzagging walkway that runs through it. Such a structure required several new methods to be used for it to be completed, such as the use of the relatively new building material aluminium and the use of computer modeling. Today, the aviary is no longer home to birds. Instead, it is home to a completely different group of animals, monkeys. Black and white colobus monkeys, to be exact, who claimed the former aviary in 2022 after a major renovation, allowing the aviary to continue the zoo's tradition of amazing architecture. But alongside these amazing exhibits, these buildings have played host to some of the most famous animals not only in Britain, but also in the world. And if you want to learn about one of these very animals, click the video on the screen. Until next time, bye-bye.